have another creepy story about Epping Forest. This is from somebody who still lives in Epping Forest. So back a few years ago, before Just Eat, they would really struggle to get any sort of takeaway delivered to their house because they have a gate right at the bottom of their driveway and it's run by an intercom. And from time to time, it just wouldn't work. Wonder why. One of the places that they could always get a delivery from was Domino's. So this one night they order a Domino's and after about 40 minutes it still hasn't arrived, and maybe there's a problem because normally it was quite quick. Then they look at their phone and they realise they have missed the calls from their driver. They call the number back and they say, "Are you our delivery man?" And he says yes. He says, "I'm outside." Because the intercom isn't working, you have to go down manually and open the gate. So off goes the husband to open the gate. He gets down there, he can't see anybody, so he calls the number back and he says, "Where are you?" The guy on the other end says, "I'm outside." And he's like, "I can't see you anywhere, I must be in the wrong place." So he says, "Okay, cool, I'm gonna walk back up because it's freezing. I'm gonna leave the gate open, just drive straight up when you find me." It's back in and the driver is calling him again. He says, "Sir, can you come outside so I can see you?" Okay, this is frustrating, but he goes back outside and the guy says, "Can you wave your hands?" So the guy on the phone, he puts his hands up and he waves his hand, and the driver says, "I still can't see you. What are you wearing? What can you see? Are you on your own? Are you with anyone else?" Homeowner describes exactly what he's wearing. He says, "I'm waving my hands around, I'm jumping up and down." And then the guy says, "Oh yes, I can see you." And the homeowner, he starts to hear the crunching of the drive. And so he says, "Okay, I'm going to wait for you inside." So he turns back around and he walks the short distance back into his house. After some more minutes waiting with the door open, he decides that he's just going to shut the door because the cold air is getting in. So he calls the number back a few times and at first they don't answer. And then they do answer. And the guy says, "Where are you? I heard you walking up the drive, but then you just like disappeared. And now I can't see you." And the guy on the other end says, "But I can see you." Suddenly he realises that this man's voice is not friendly, and they call Domino's back using the actual Domino's number rather than the phone number that they've been calling. And Domino's said, "Our driver was unable to find you. He left about an hour ago." And this poor couple now are just left overnight wondering if the person who came up their driveway when they opened the gate has actually left. Who was he, and why would he even want to come up their driveway and scare them?
Yesterday, a woman gave birth under a underpass in Walthamstow in East London and disappeared, vanished. This story absolutely baffles me, and it just gets weirder and more worrying the more you hear. Around 8 a.m. in Walthamstow, a woman was found by a stranger crying in distress, and this stranger found out that this woman is actually giving birth. This stranger, a very good Samaritan, stayed with this woman and helped her give birth under this underpass. The woman who gave birth is reportedly a rough sleeper, and she gave birth then and there on the streets in public. When she was giving birth, I'm not sure if there was any medical assistance called, an ambulance, the police. I don't think anyone was called because I can't see any reports on the internet that any sort of help came. 8 hours later, around 4 p.m, she was picked up by two men in a blue transit van. Then she disappeared, gone. Literally a mystery, gone in the wind. Nobody knows who these men are. Nobody knows if these men were helping her or if she's in danger. All the police know, she's missing, the baby's missing, and they're desperate to find her. The woman was described to be wearing a black dress and a heavy jumper. She is believed to be called Anne Marie. The police are desperately trying to find her because they don't know if she was taken willingly. They don't know if she's safe. They don't know her medical situation. They know nothing. So they just want to make sure that she's okay and that she has all the treatment and everything she needs as a new mother who just gave birth rough on the streets. This is really weird because I live in East London. So if anybody lives in East London, just keep your eyes out. I mean, you literally never know. You literally never know. The internet is so powerful. Because we don't know if this woman is in danger. We don't know anything about this woman, because by all means she could be okay or she could be in serious danger.
What just happened at a theme park in Saudi is straight out of a Final Destination horror film. People always call me paranoid when I won't go on these kind of rides, but this is exactly why. It was the 31st of July 2025 when hundreds of people flocked to the Green Mountain Resort in the city of Taif. The amusement park itself is described as an expansive theme park with rides for kids, including a Ferris wheel, carousels and toboggan. Essentially, it's like an Alton Towers kind of vibe if you're from the UK. But joy turned to horror when one of these rides malfunctioned mid-air. The ride is called 360 Degrees and was basically full and mid-air when it literally snapped in half. It snapped like a piece of chalk. It's honestly wild. You can see the video online. In the videos you can hear a loud crack and suddenly there's just sheer panic. People sprinted for cover because they had no idea if this ride was about to land on their head. The arm of the ride then smashed into the ground. It kind of lurched a little bit and something can be seen flying through midair. Luckily the ride did land relatively flatly, so I think that was a blessing, to be honest, because this had the potential to kill a lot of people. Emergency services obviously raced to the scene and some injured people were given first aid there and then, and some had to be rushed to hospital. The hospital declared a code yellow emergency, which basically means some sort of like major incident, some kind of like disaster basically. It was reported that 23 people were injured, 3 critically injured. Now the ride has been suspended since because it's literally in 2 pieces, but I believe the whole theme park has also been put on lockdown, suspended. The Saudi Arabian law enforcement have launched an investigation into this incident and what caused this. Just months earlier, a very similar type of ride caused a 13-year-old to sustain multiple fractures when he slipped out of his seat and was like clinging on for dear life as the ride continued to sway and rock back and forth and rotate. I think that incident took place in Indonesia. I can't see any updates online about whether the people hurt in this incident are actually okay and whether they've pulled through.
So these ghost stories actually come from my mother, and she wanted me to tell the stories for her because she said that she didn't want to be on camera, and since I was online telling my stories, that I should tell some of hers too. So my mom has been through a lot of crazy stuff, right? But one of the craziest stories is one of the apartments where we were staying in, and she seen like a little boy running back and forth between like the bedroom and in the bathroom, right? And she thought it was my brother, but it turns out it was like a little ghost boy or whatever, right? He didn't do too much. He just, you know, we all kind of saw him running back and forth in there. He scared the shit out of us. But one night where she was, she went into that bathroom to take a shower, and she said that she had the lights out, but she had a candle on the sink, and the candle was on the sink underneath of the mirror, and the mirror was like a cabinet, right? And I think it was like 2 candles that were lit, and she also had a clear shower curtain so she could see the candles that were lit, you know, sitting on the countertop, right? She's taking her shower, and she said she looked out of the shower curtain and she saw this, it looked like black smoke coming up from underneath of the mirror. So she threw back the shower curtain and she didn't see the smoke anymore. So she was like, okay, maybe like the cabinet's starting to burn or something like that. Let me blow out some of these candles. So she blew out some candles and she left one of them lit, and it wasn't like in an area where it can burn anything anymore. She gets back in the shower. And she looks out the shower curtain again, and then the black smoke is in the middle of the bathroom in front of the door, and she said it was like a cloud that like started to form up and down at the same time into like a person. And I don't know if she fainted a little bit or what, but she was like, the next thing she knew, she was basically like on all fours in the shower about to hit her face on the faucet. So to me, it sounds like she kind of like fainted and almost hit the floor. But she stopped herself from hitting the faucet, and she got up and she snatched the shower curtain down and she wrapped it around herself like a towel, and she ran into her friend at the time who we were staying with, him and his girlfriend's room. She ran into their room, butt naked, sitting on the end of the bed, shivering because she didn't know what that was. What do y'all think? Y'all want to hear more of her stories?
If you're the type of person that likes to smoke a little something and then go on little adventures, yeah, just don't do it in Mexico in the middle of the night in the mountains, or this may happen to you. Why am I so dramatic? If an adventure is what you want, well, an adventure is what you'll get. If you watch my videos from last week, there was a story about this guy and his friend who would go to the mountains to smoke some, and they end up seeing a horse lady. I remember saying, hopefully he learned his lesson, hopefully he doesn't go there again. Yeah, no, he went there. He went there with his friends again. So let me share the story that happened. Of course, I almost forgot. Okay, so we all know him and his friends go up the mountain to smoke a little bit, but this time he says that they went up the mountain in motorcycles. He explains that as they're riding up the mountain, they can hear almost like hyenas laughing. So he knew that it might be some sort of animal up the hills with them, because all he would hear are like, it just sounded like laughters, but he knew that it was coming from animals. I don't think there's hyenas in Mexico, which is why I don't think there were hyenas. He explains it as it sounded like hyenas. The sounds definitely didn't stop them from going up the mountain though, and he says they were enjoying their time riding their motorcycles, and that sometimes they would even separate into different paths, but they would come back together again. So in one of the moments where they did separate and went to their own paths to ride the motorcycles, he says that he hit a turn and he accidentally fell. The motorcycle actually fell on top of him, and it made his leg like bend in a really awkward position. He wasn't able to take that motorcycle off of himself, so he started screaming for help, hoping that his friends would hear him, but it didn't seem like they did. He explains how he was laying there, wasn't able to move, and all he could hear were those like laughters that sounded like hyenas. In that moment is when he saw that there was a truck coming up one of the trails, and they stopped right next to him. This man gets out of the truck, helps him get up, puts his motorcycle in that truck, and even takes him home with him. Once they get to this guy's house, the guy's telling him that he's so lucky that he found them up in the mountain. The man explains to him that as he was riding to his house, which was up in that hill like close by, he was noticing all of the witches that were surrounding the mountain, and those hyena laughters that he thought were coming from animals were actually coming from the witches. He was really lucky that guy found him, but also like, please don't tell me there's another story of him going up the damn mountains again. Actually, never mind. If there is, we at least know he's safe, because these are stories from his like teenage days, because he's already like much older and he's just retelling stories that happened to him when he was young. So maybe he didn't go back, but I guess we'll find out if he has more stories to share. But anyway, what do you guys think?
Creepy story about Epping Forest, and this one I heard in person because I went to this place and I asked the staff myself. So there is an absolutely stunning pub hotel type thing that was built in the 1800s, and it's recently all been done up. I walked in there yesterday and I thought, let me just ask the staff if they have any first-hand experiences with ghosts in this sort of place, because it's got to be haunted, surely. Every single one of them had an experience, apart from the person who I'm assuming was the manager, and I don't blame him for not wanting to tell me, because let's face it, he probably knows I'm going to make a TikTok about it and then people won't want to stay there, or maybe you will. I would stay there, it's really nice. One night, it's pitch black outside. There's 2 members of staff and they're the last ones there, and they've been really struggling to get these last 2 punters out. Rather than just stand there while they finish their beer, they start to close up around them. They start to do the floors. At some point, they both go down to the cellar. They leave these 2 guys in the pub by themselves. When the 2 members of staff come back up, the guys are getting their coats on and they're ready to leave. They're getting ready to shut the doors. And one of the guys says, "Don't lock the door yet, there's still a woman." And both the members of staff are looking at each other like, "No, there's not, like, you're the last 2. And they're like, "No, she's been walking around this whole time." So feeling a little bit annoyed and a bit irritated that they were now going to have to go in and like get this person who's probably very drunk out of the bar so that they can actually close, way past closing now. They go back in, they start calling around. They're like, "Hello, come out, like, is anybody here?" And the 2 guys that were leaving, they hang around because they're like not happy with the fact that this person is potentially hiding, and these are 2 women closing up a bar. So the 2 guys have a little look around themselves, and then reluctantly they leave, and the staff members, they close down. Just as they put the key in the lock to leave, they both hear what they think is a woman laughing, and it sounds like it's coming from behind the bar. They run, they put the lights on, and they start to shout, "It's not funny, we're going to call the police, like, you're trespassing, we need to close the bar." And they start to look around everywhere. Once again, they go to look up. They turn the lights off. You hear, clear as day, a woman laughing. Now at this point, they're not playing anymore, and one of them is like, "Let's just lock this person in. Like, let's put the alarm on, let's lock it in, let's let the police deal with this." They do exactly that. They lock the pub down and they walk away. They leave. That very night, 2 other hotel guests report seeing a woman hanging around outside their room, walking up and down as if she is lost. And they are so freaked out by her that they report it to the members of the night staff. Then at 3 a.m, the fire alarm goes off. There is no fire, there is no drill, and they have no idea why the fire alarm went off. They cannot find a fault. This is the creepy bit. That pub famously burnt down in the 1900s, and it killed 3 people. It killed 2 hotel guests, man and a woman, who were together, and it also killed a fireman. And apparently the woman had been downstairs drinking and the man had been upstairs when the fire started, and the fire was on the top floor. He was killed early on in the fire, and when she was told, his partner, that he had died, at first she laughed because she thought it was a joke and she was drunk. Then When she realised that it was true and that her partner had died, the fire had started in their room, she ran back into the fire, ending herself, and the firemen ran after her. And that's how 3 people ended up dying. The members of staff who closed up that night did not know that this was the anniversary of that fire. They didn't know that the woman had laughed. Initially, they didn't know any of the backstory. And the guests that reported seeing this mystery woman hanging around outside their room in the corridor, they were on the top floor. I feel like we need a deep dive on this specific hotel because I would love to do each one of the staff members' stories, which also includes like bottles of wine being thrown at members of staff's head when they're closing up. I mean, that's a poltergeist. I don't want to give like specific names of places because I don't think I'm allowed to do that, but all I will say is that it was a very nice pub and I didn't see any ghosts, but I did have a glass of mulled wine and it was nice. And next door, you can go and see like this famous landmark where a certain king used to hunt. I fear I've been too specific on that one, but you know.
I don't know if you've seen this in the news or not, but comedian Matt Rife has bought the Warrens Occult Museum. And now he owns everything in there, including the Annabelle doll. Now, I don't know about you, but this is insane. Because you have to understand, he didn't choose to buy that place. He didn't choose to own that doll. That doll chose him. This is all part of its plan. It wants to get out, and now it is being given access to basically wreak havoc. And you have someone who has no idea what he's doing. Nothing. Doesn't know anything about the paranormal. And doesn't understand the powers he's messing with. And I've seen these things go very, very wrong. And this could get really, really bad. Because basically, it's like giving someone who never flown a plane before full access to the controls. Because anything could happen. And I suspect you're going to see in the next couple of weeks, this thing will go missing again. And I think that something is at work here. I think this was all in play so that it could get to the right people to allow it to get out. I don't know. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
So it's been storming pretty much all day, and in the Midwest, anytime it storms, it calls for something scary. So today I'm going to be answering a huge question in my comment section, and that is, what is the difference between mimics, shapeshifters, and skinwalkers? So just before I start, I do just want to make it known that this is all very surface research. I only had to research one of these topics, and that was shapeshifting, because I thought shapeshifters and skinwalkers coincided with one another. They kind of do, but there's a huge distinction between skinwalker and shapeshifter, and I will get into that in a second. But let's start off with the easy stuff, a mimic. So as everyone is, I'm sure, well aware now, I have had multiple experiences with a mimic. These are just spirits that mimic human behavior. So this is speech patterns, how people laugh, talk, like I said, whispers, sneezing, stuff like that. So from what I could find, I think it's pretty uncommon to physically see a mimic just because it is a spirit and it's already pretty uncommon to see spirits as it is. However, if you want to know more and you want to see more, there is a series on Netflix called Haunted, and in season 1 they have an episode called, I'm pretty sure it's titled The Mimic, and it's just basically this group of people that moved into a house retelling their events and their hauntings from a mimic spirit. 10 out of 10, kind of scary, would recommend. Moving on to shapeshifters, these are specifically supernatural creatures that take shape of different people and things by unnatural means. It's considered one of the earliest forms of shamanism, which I thought was kind of scary and kind of cool. However, this means that it's just a copy-paste of physical appearance. It's not emotional, behavioral. The mannerisms aren't the same because they themselves don't understand or know the behaviors of that person. A great example I like to think about is in City Chapter 2, when it opens with the father acting differently towards his family, and the mom is like, what the heck is wrong with you? And he's like, oh, it's nothing. I get that it's a demonic possession and it's a completely different topic, but the mannerisms and behavior are exactly the same. And I just briefly want to pause before someone puts like, I hear growling, I hear speaking, because those comments actually scare me. My dogs are in the back, they're sleeping. Last but not least, everyone's favorite, skinwalkers. These, in my opinion, I have never had a run-in with a skinwalker, so I don't know if they are real. Maybe people can drop their experiences in the comments, because I absolutely love reading all of your guys' experiences. It's super fascinating that a lot of us have the same experiences. But it's important to note that the Wendigo and the skinwalker are literally the same thing. Skinwalker is just like the new word. Wendigo derives from Native American culture, because that's where this creature came from, is Native American culture. Specifically a process called the witchery way. And remember that little detail that I was mentioning about like the difference between shapeshifters and skinwalkers? It's cannibalism. So specifically, to become a skinwalker, you have to a close family member, and so you turn into them. I don't know. I'm just regurgitating the information that I read from like multiple websites, including the Denver History Library, which is a .org. So I don't know. But I do know that these creatures have a vicious cycle where they act like prey, then they kill their prey, and then their prey, and then they turn into it, and then they replace the prey, and then they do it again. So that's why a lot of these creatures sound like people and animals, because them. So I hope that cleared up a lot of information for everyone else, because I've been getting a lot of comments that were like, the mimic wasn't really a mimic, it was a skinwalker and you're gonna die. And I truly believe that it's just a mimic spirit, because number one, I've never seen it. And I don't think whatever it is trying to harm me, because I heard it the other day and I actually took your guys' advice and I didn't respond back. And I didn't tell my boyfriend because I was too scared. And I just want to let y'all know now that what I have coming next is poltergeist activity. So watch out for that one.
I got a case for y'all. It's so terrifying and heartbreaking. Warning, this is a true crime case. If you're not into that, then do not watch this video. You have been warned. Now let's get into this case. It is September 13th in the year 2005, a really hot day for citizens in Lubbock, Texas. And at the city landfill, a worker noticed something odd, something that just seemed out of place to him. A black suitcase. But it wasn't the suitcase that was odd. It was what was sticking out of the suitcase. When he first opens it, he thinks it's a mannequin, but quickly realizes a young lady had been stuck inside. He immediately calls the authorities. Inside the suitcase was a young female with red hair and a tattoo on her ankle that read Summer. They send the young woman and the suitcase to the medical examiner. She had bruises all over her body from head to toe. The medical examiner found that she was stuck inside the suitcase while she was still alive, making her cause of death asphyxiation. She suffocated inside of the suitcase. The medical examiner also found that the victim was 2.5 months pregnant. But who is she? Homicide detective Towton English focuses on the suitcase that she was found in. He gets a hold of the manufacturer, and they tell him that their suitcase is only sold at Walmart stores. No other stores have this suitcase. So he goes to the local Walmart. He wants to know if anybody had purchased this exact brand suitcase anytime recently. And they tell him that they keep track of any items purchased in their store and can tell what time they were purchased. On surveillance footage, they see a man walk through the doors of Walmart at around 3 in the morning purchasing this suitcase. He looks to be Hispanic or white. This man purchased the suitcase and gloves with a credit card. So they track this card and find that the credit card was used about 15 minutes after leaving Walmart at a nearby gas station to buy gasoline. This gas station had a hotel across the street. It's a big leap, but they go to the hotel across the street to see if anybody there recognizes their suspect. To their surprise, a lady at the front desk recognized their suspect. She said his name was Thomas Rodriguez, but they later find out that that's not his real name. His name is Rosendo Rodriguez. They ask for the key fob to his hotel room. Upon entering, they are welcomed with a disturbing sight. They see blood on the floor, on the box spring, and also on a sheet. And in the hallway was a trash can outside of Rosendo's hotel room. And inside was only one item, a pair of rubber latex gloves. They want to find him now, so they track him. They try to see where his phone is pinging from. He's on a moving bus leaving town. While he was on this bus, he sent a smiling selfie to his girlfriend, telling her that he was on his way back to San Antonio, where he originally was from. What was he doing in Lubbock, Texas? They don't know yet. Investigators make their way to San Antonio and go to Rosendo's parents' home, where they find Rosendo in his bedroom on the computer. If you think the case ends here, you're wrong. They think that they found their suspect and it's an open and closed case. But no, they're about to find out way more than what they ever suspected in the beginning. They search his computer and they see that he typed the name Summer Baldwin into the search bar multiple times. Summer Baldwin was a fair-skinned redhead. DNA confirmed the victim in the suitcase to be Summer Baldwin, but the case does not end here. There's another name that he searched multiple times: Joanna Rogers. Joanna Rogers was a 16-year-old high school student who had been missing for the last 18 months and still had not been found. When police look at it further, they notice that Joanna and Summer are both fair-skinned with red hair. There's a pattern here. This is a specific kind of woman that he likes. He likes gingers. They think to themselves, well, if he did this to Summer Baldwin, why couldn't he have done this to Joanna? Joanna's parents said the last time they seen their daughter was 18 months earlier when she came home from her late night shift at a sandwich shop. They said she told them goodnight and that she loved them, and when they woke up the next morning, she was gone. Through further searching on his computer, they find that Rosendo did in fact have contact with Joanna Rogers the night she disappeared, but they don't have a body. Since Summer Baldwin's nude body was found at the local landfill, they want to know if Joanna Rogers could possibly be there as well, even though it had been 18 months later. They find out that the local landfill is way more organized than what they suspected. They still have trash from a year prior, and it's organized to know what neighborhood this trash came from. So they asked them for the trash that came from Joanna's neighborhood over a year prior. They organized a search team of over 100 people to search through all this garbage. After 3 months go by, they assumed that they're probably never gonna find Joanna, until on one hot day, a backhoe that was picking up trash picked up a black suitcase. Inside were the skeletal remains of 16-year-old Joanna Rogers. Because it had been so long, they could not determine an official cause of death. They believe that on the night Joanna disappeared, Rosendo called her to tell her to come outside. She probably thought they would hang out or do whatever they talked about doing, but she didn't know that when she left her home, it would be the last time. Rosendo was charged with the murder of Summer Baldwin, but because of the lack of evidence with Joanna, they could not charge him with that one. Rosendo was arrested and sentenced to death, and was executed in 2018. Investigators wholeheartedly believe that if Rosendo was never caught, he would have definitely killed again, most likely just gingers. Police have no doubt in their minds that Rosendo Rodriguez is responsible for the passing of 29-year-old Summer Baldwin and 16-year-old Joanna Rogers.
Snacks in hand, the vibe is set, and once I start, you won't forget. Don't eat too much, because you gotta stay fine. Become one bestie, it's story time. So, for the sake of this story, let's call this girl Jasmine. So, Jasmine's great-grandparents owned about 78 acres of land from the 1920s through 1960s. It stayed in the family, and it was just, passed down from generations to generations. And it ended up being passed down, of course, to Jasmine's grandparents. But here's the kicker. Back in the 1800s, before her family even owned that land, this lady was on that land, and her body was never recovered. And some people even said that her body was buried right on that land, and her spirit stayed and never left. So fast forward, Jasmine actually grew up on that land. She grew up with her mom and her grandparents, and for the most part, her childhood was pretty normal, except for the fact that whenever she was there, she would always see black shadowy figures around the house, around the land, but nobody really talked about it or stressed it. Everyone pretty much always goes on with their day whenever it happens. They treated it like it was normal. Anyways, there comes this one night. Jasmine's about 5 or 6 years old at the time. Her grandmother, let's call her Ruth. Her grandmother's there with her. She's sitting at the dining table, coloring her books. Miss Ruth is sitting right there too, watching TV. And as she's sitting there coloring her books, the TV turns off and then turns back on. And they both were kind of like, okay, weird, but whatever, it's back on. And about 30 seconds after that happens, the lights start flickering like crazy. Miss Ruth is sitting there like, there must be a power surge. The TV just turned off and turned back on, and now the lights are flickering. What is going on? And as she's saying that, the light starts to flicker brighter and faster until the light bulb exploded. And shattered glass is now all over the floor. Still, they didn't panic because Miss Ruth is still thinking, yeah, we're having some electrical issue, right? But at this point, Jasmine is starting to really be scared because she's 5 at the time. And kids feel that kind of stuff, Miss Ruth basically tells her hey, don't worry about it. I'm going to go grab another light bulb. We're going to put it back and everything's going to be fine. And she walks to the back of the house, leaving Jasmine in the living room. Haitian. Fucking Haitian. Wait, Jasmine is in the living room by herself, terrified. And as she's standing in the living room, one of those black shadowy figures she's been seeing appears again. Except it doesn't disappear. Usually it'll come and go, but this time it didn't disappear at all. Instead, it starts walking towards Jasmine. When Jasmine turned to look directly at it, it locked eyes with Jasmine and was just staring at her. So at this point, Miss Ruth comes back and Jasmine is like, Grandma, the shadowy figure came and it's staring at me. Grandma, help. Miss Ruth is like, oh my God, you and your imagination. There's no shadowy figure staring at you, girl. You probably just need glasses. Jasmine is like, Grandma, it's over there. And Miss Ruth turns ready to tell Jasmine, like, see, there's nobody there. Except that wasn't the case, because there was indeed somebody there. Grandma turns and Grandma sees exactly what Jasmine is seeing. And now Grandma's terrified. She's frozen. Her whole face turned ghost white. And as soon as she made eye contact with that thing, the entire house started shaking. Now shit is getting real. Some scary movie type shit, y'all. The house started shaking. The glass case where, all grandmas keep their fine chinas, it exploded. Chinas are flying out of that bitch. Everything is getting shattered. Shit is getting real. And Jasmine, poor baby, she's there terrified. And as she's watching this happen, she felt it. She felt something behind her. Before she could even think that she feels something behind her, she started to float off the floor. I told y'all this was some scary movie type shit. She started floating off of the floor. All of a sudden, she couldn't breathe. She was being choked. She is off the floor, choking for a full 20 to 30 seconds. Miss Ruth is watching this happen. And when the thing, whatever it is, decided they wanted to stop stop choking Jasmine, it dropped her, right? And Jasmine fell to the floor. So Miss Ruth ran over to Jasmine and looked at Jasmine's neck, and there were handprints all over her neck. Actually, no, there were 2 giant handprints over her neck. So immediately, Miss Ruth takes Jasmine, runs out the house, calls her daughter, Jasmine's mom, tell her, please come home immediately. I don't know what the hell is happening, but you need to come home. Mind you, the house is still shaking. Anyways, fast forward, Jasmine's mom comes, but the funny thing is, the moment she walks into the house, everything stops. All the shaking, the glass shattering, the things flying, it stops. Everything went dead silent. Safe to say, after that situation, Jasmine and her move. I can't speak today. Jasmine and her mom moved out very shortly after. But Miss Ruth stayed in that house because she inherited it, Unfortunately, what is happening? I'm not deleting none of them. Anyway, until the day that Miss Ruth ended up passing away, she was tormented a lot. She had night terrors every night. She'd wake up with bruises all over her body. She ended up in the hospital many, many times from just exhaustion. Anyways, fast forward to now. Well, not now. Last spring, the family ended up selling the property because they just couldn't anymore. They did warn the new owners about everything that they went through, everything that happened. And guess what? Right now, the owners are dealing with the same things. They're experiencing the same things, if not worse. But at least they took that off their chest. They don't got to deal with that anymore. Feel bad for the new owners, but, Anyways, that's the story. Come catch me perform at Brooklyn Unity Fex. I'm just going to end the video.
Surprisingly, this duende story is not from Mexico. However, the family did move from Mexico to the United States. We are not safe. So this guy says that growing up, he knew his mom was very spiritual, that she even took some kind of drink that made her look into her past life. And on the completely opposite end was his dad, who was a very big skeptic. He says his dad doesn't even like to talk about anything paranormal, he will cut the conversation. He doesn't even want to be involved in anything. So one day he says that his mom's sister, so his aunt, came to their house and gifted his mom a duende. The duende was like a tiny figurine. He said that it was smiling and he had really dark green clothes on. The duende had a little pointy hat on, and he remembers when his mom came up to him and his sister and told them that they needed to treat the duende as if it was another person in their family. He recalls that in that that moment when the mom said that, they started laughing because they thought that she was joking. Nevertheless, they did agree to the mom that they were going to treat the duende like he was part of the family. But he says that in the beginning everything was fine. They had placed the duende like on the bar of the kitchen and everything was normal. However, he says that little by little, and it's gonna sound crazy, but strange things started happening in their house. There was one day where he was taking care of his sisters. So he has one sister that was close to his age and another sister that was 5 years old, and she was the youngest. So again, he's taking care of his two sisters, and he noticed that the youngest, the 5-year-old, had gone to the restroom, but it had already been an hour and she hadn't came back. So he gets up, he goes to the restroom door. Right before he's about to start knocking on the door to see what's going on because he was worried, he hears his 5-year-old sister laughing like crazy inside of the restroom. He still knocks and he's like, hey, is everything okay? When he knocked on the door, he said that the laughter just stopped immediately, and he asked his sister, is everything okay? And she's like, yeah, it's because it makes me laugh so much. Of course, he was like, who's making you laugh so much? And the little sister responds, my new friend. He explains that she answers like if it was normal, like it was nothing to her, but when he heard that, he got like the chills and he was kind of scared. He asked her to open the door, and when she did, she just came out of the restroom running past them and laughing, and when he checked into the restroom, there was nothing in there. After his mom got home that night, he did explain to her everything that happened in the restroom, and that the mom reassured him that she was going to take care of it and look into it and see what happened. He honestly thought that everything was going to end there because now his mom knew she was going to take care of it, but unfortunately that is not what happened. After that, he says little things started happening. He would lose something and then would find it in a completely different room where he knows that nobody would have put it. His keys, his wallet, like things like that would appear elsewhere. Like he knows that no one had touched it, but they would appear in random places of the house. At first, they all just gave the excuse that maybe we're tired, maybe we're misplacing it, but it happened so much that they couldn't use that excuse anymore. His younger sister, the one that is between him and the 5-year-old, stopped sleeping by herself. She said that she felt like somebody was constantly watching her. And on the completely different end, the little 5, sorry, I just heard it in Spanish and now I'm translating and I'm scared, okay? So on the opposite end was the 5-year-old who they were now catching her talk by herself, and then she would say random things to them like, my friend says that they don't like you. Okay, well, tell your friend it's on site. Tell your friend it's on site. There was one night where he woke up because he had the weirdest feeling like something wasn't right, and he was reaching for his glasses that he had put next to his nightstand, and when he grabbed them, they were literally broken in half, like if somebody had intentionally just broken them apart. That's also the moment where he was like, this is it, I've had enough. Like, he went to his mom and he's like, this duende is doing these things to us, and the mom had to accept that she did feel like it was the duende as well. That same night, the mom put the little duende figurine in a wooden box with salt and holy water, and then she said some like prayers that the lady had told her that she needed to say to the duende. She ended up putting that wooden box with everything into a closet, but unfortunately he says that it got worse. That same week when they put the duende into that closet, when they were all in the living room, they would hear like kid footsteps in the hallway. They would hear where like dishes would fall and break, and sometimes where the doors would slam by themselves. There's also one night where mom, dad, and the 3 kids were all watching a movie in the living room, and they clearly heard where somebody just like ran behind them and into the darkened hallway. The 5-year-old wasn't talking to her friend anymore, and she was having nightmares, and where everyone would hear her screaming, please don't take me, please don't take me, I don't want to go with you. There was one particular night where everybody was asleep and everyone heard the dad screaming. They all got up, ran to the parents' bedroom, and the dad was saying that something was whispering in his ear. He says that it was the first time that the dad had ever even accepted that something strange was happening and that something was going really bad, because again, he was a skeptic and he didn't believe in any of this. After this, the mom was telling her neighbor everything that was happening, that she didn't know what to do, and that's when the neighbor said that she knew how to get rid of that duende, but it was going to be like a permanent like get away from us type of thing. They had to bury the little figurine away from their home into the dirt, and that they had to respectfully say goodbye to the duende. They did end up doing the ritual, but they were still scared because they didn't know if it was gonna get even worse or if it was actually gonna go away. He said after that, everything did calm down. They did end up moving into another house, and he says that that same night, the weirdest sensation that he was very familiar with came back to him, where he woke up in the middle of the night and he knew that something was not okay. When he gets up, he says that he, from far away, could hear like laughter of a child, and almost like if that laughter was making fun of him. However, the laughter went from being far away to then sounding like it was coming from underneath his bed. The next day when they were in the garden, he said that he noticed that little 5-year-old looking at a corner of that garden, and she was staring at that corner for a good minute until she went up to him and said, "There's some people calling me from there." He's unsure if they actually got rid of the duende or if the duende followed them to the new house. And that is the end of the story, because this is happening in real time right now, and basically there's nothing else to add at the moment until something hopefully not happens. But what do you guys think? They didn't even tell us what part of the US. They could be our neighbor. What the hell? I'm not scared. Everything's fine.
I'm not certain about a lot in life, but one thing I am certain of is how genuinely disturbing this story is, and how you 100% will not sleep tonight because of it. This is a young girl who went missing in Mexico sometime in the 90s, and she was featured on a really popular broadcast called Community Service on Channel 5. This broadcast featured local missing person cases, but once Selena's case popped up, weird things started to happen, causing viewers to panic. What happened to Selena and everything that followed is extremely disturbing, so let's talk about it. So Channel 5 is a Mexican TV station that has been around since the 50s. The channel is aimed at children, with segments airing during commercial breaks on Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. And while some might not think anything of it, it's actually pretty disturbing when you find out what exactly they're airing for kids to see. So each night, Channel 5 would often air a broadcast called Community Service, which features real local missing person cases. Every time it came on, it would list a ton of missing people, and usually a lot of information and photos would be attached to each case. The goal was to air this in hopes of finding these missing people and bring them home. This is a great way to spread the word on missing people, but some thought it was a little dark to do this on kids' channels, because after all, they are just kids, and these segments were known to be kind of sinister and bleak. But this was supposedly done on purpose to show young kids how scary the world can actually be, and in a way it was meant to teach them to be safe. This all had good intentions, but in 2001, Channel 5 featured a missing persons case that would unintentionally cause mass panic, even to this day. In 2001, Community Service featured the missing persons case of 18-year-old Selena Delgado Lopez, who disappeared on April 22nd. The year she disappeared has never been proven, although it's suggested that she disappeared sometime in the late 90s. What made this case stand out to viewers was this uncanny, poorly lit photo of Selena, and the fact that there was hardly any information about her disappearance besides her name, age, and where she went missing, which was in Mexico City. This was odd because everyone else that was featured on this broadcast had a lot of information and a ton of photos, but Selena's case didn't have any of that. Channel 5 aired Selena's photo and case for years, but it wasn't long until viewers started noticing something strange. Every time Selena's case and photo came on the TV, viewers started to get really uncomfortable and afraid, citing the nature of her photo as incredibly bizarre. Viewers noted how oddly terrified her photo made them feel, as it was super uncanny. Adding to the mystery surrounding this whole phenomenon is the fact that whenever Selena's photo would be featured, the TV channel would freeze and glitch out for a few minutes before the broadcast would abruptly cut to static. Because of the mass panic and strange coincidences like the TV glitching whenever her photo came on the screen, scary urban legends started to spread surrounding Selena and what really happened to her. Some said that Selena was met with a horrible fate and that her spirit haunted Channel 5 whenever her picture showed up on the screen. Others said that her photo was simply cursed. Some even went so far as to say that Selena was not a real missing person and that her uncanny photo was actually created using AI. And this theory was kind of backed up when people started looking into Selena's case and found no public record of her disappearance. It was around the time of Selena's disappearance and feature on Channel 5 that this photo started going around. It's obviously incredibly disturbing, and at the time, no one knew where it came from. Some pointed out the similarities between Selena's face and this one when lined up over each other, and videos about the glitches viewers would experience began circulating, just like this one.
XHGC Canal 5, al servicio de la comunidad. Pedimos ayuda para localizar a Selena Delgado López, de 18 años, se extravió el 22 de abril en la delegación Álvaro Obregón. Selena Delgado López se ignora su paradero desde el 28 de mayo del año 2000. Selena Delgado López, de 18 años, se extravió el 22 de abril en la delegación Álvaro Obregón.
Although creepy, this photo is actually just a police sketch of Derek Todd Lee, aka the Baton Rouge Slayer. Derek was a serial killer who between 1998 and 2003 terrorized Baton Rouge and the surrounding areas. He killed at least 7 women, and before he was caught, authorities released this composite sketch of him. He was officially arrested and charged for these crimes in 2004, but somehow his composite sketch became associated with Selena's photo, thus fueling these really scary urban legends and stories about her death and disappearance. Like I said earlier, Channel 5 continued to air Selena's case on community service for years after the fact, because no one was able to confirm if she was actually a real missing person. And every time they did, viewers would still feel incredibly afraid and uncomfortable, and their TVs would all glitch. And as the years passed, this disturbing experience would remain a mystery, as would Selena's disappearance. Then in 2010, Channel 5 would begin to post some really disturbing photos and videos on Twitter. This is a video they posted. It's so creepy, and although it wasn't created by them, just reposted, no one knows why they randomly started doing this. Their Twitter account would be totally normal during the day, but every night, usually around 3 a.m., they began posting these disturbing videos, and by morning, they would all be deleted. One of the videos they posted had a caption mentioning Selena, and it is really creepy. When employees at Channel 5 were questioned about this, no one knew anything about it. That, in and of itself, is genuinely so scary to me, but then in 2020, Selena's disappearance and the urban legends surrounding it once again resurfaced, and this became known as the Facebook incident. In 2020, a Facebook page of a woman with the exact same name as Selena popped up. It started gaining some traction because users discovered that they had already been added as her friend, even though no one knew her, and none of them sent her a friend request. To their horror, they also discovered that there was no option to unfriend her either. This led people to believe that her profile was haunted and in some way connected to what happened to Selena. This profile was shared thousands of times, and while it is a little creepy, there was actually a really logical explanation for the entire thing. This profile turned out to just be someone with the same name as Selena, and she had really just changed her privacy settings. She removed the add friend option from her profile, and because her page was blowing up and she had no clue why, she privated her account, which is still there to this day. Although a lot about this story is still a mystery, there are a few theories that could explain what's going on with Channel 5 and Selena's disappearance. Theory number 1 is that Selena is a real missing person, and her lack of information is simply due to the lack of resources back then. There are a lot of missing people in Mexico, especially during that time, so maybe her disappearance was just never followed up on. If that's the case and she is a real missing person, it's extremely sad, and her family deserves answers as to what really happened to her. Cable TV back then wasn't great quality, so that could explain the nature of her photo as well as the glitching and freezing on the channel. It could have really happened, maybe just due to technical issues. Theory number 2 was that Selena is not a real missing person, and it's been suggested that Channel 5 created her to fuel a fake urban legend in order to scare young viewers into being safe. It could be that this is all a hoax to shed some light on how unsafe the world actually is, and it could very well just be a publicity stunt to get people to watch the broadcast. Either that, or Selena's case and photo was created by someone else with the sole intent of scaring people, and Channel 5 didn't do its due diligence to make sure it was real before airing. That's weird to me though, because they continued airing her story for years after the fact. Some people lean more towards this being a hoax by Channel 5 simply because of the Twitter post in 2010 referencing Selena. Whether the story is true or not, it still gives me full body chills. It's now been 24 years since the story surfaced, but it remains a disturbing mystery to this day.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
This is the scariest thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life, and I wasn't even planning on making a video today, but I feel like I need to get out of my system because I have been welling up with tears and having full body chills from being scared. If you know me in real life, that never happens to me, so I feel like I just need to get out of my system. So this is that story. This happened 4 years ago. I was a freshman in college, and I was talking to this boy at the time, and he caught me when I was coming home for the weekend from college, and he asked if he could take me stargazing. I say yes. He picks me up. It's maybe 11, 12 o'clock at night. He drives me to the state park specifically because I had never been before, and specific to note about this state park next to my hometown, it isn't, when I say in the middle of nowhere, I legitimately mean in the middle of nowhere. The closest gas station is like multiple miles away. Nobody lives near there. Yeah, you get the gist. So we get there, he originally parks in front of this watchtower. We're walking up the watchtower. Something to note about me, you're gonna learn about 2 of my fears today. I am afraid of heights. The tower starts shaking from the small amount of wind, and I immediately am like, hey, I don't like this. We're about halfway up. I don't like this. Let's go down. So he's like, okay, I actually thought you might be scared, so I have an alternate way for us to go look at the stars, but we have to walk through the woods. Usually, and before I get any comments about that, I know, okay? I know. The only reason why I went is because he was like, it's like a minute and a half through the woods. Perfect. A minute and a half. No worries. I shouldn't have listened to him because it was a 10-minute walk, if not more. It is so dark in those effing woods that you cannot even see your hand in front of your face. I'm walking through the woods. I'm doing fine. My other fear is the dark. Okay, I'm a full-grown woman. I am exponentially scared of the dark. Like, unrealistically scared of the dark. We're walking, we hit a fence. And not just any fence, a barbed wire fence. By this time, my eyes are fully adjusted in the dark. And out in the distance, I can see a barn. Right next to the barn, I see a big silo. And if you don't know what a silo is, it's just this big metal structure that holds corn where I'm from. A lot of farmers have them. And I immediately ask him, is this someone's land? He doesn't really answer me, and I'm like, no, seriously, is this someone's land? Because I'm not going to get shot tonight. Because where I'm from, they're not going to ask you on their 5 acres of land what you're doing on their land. They're just going to shoot you because they don't know who you are at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. Or I guess what you are. So finally he tells me it's someone's land, and I'm like, I'm not trespassing on someone's land. Like, no thanks. 3 strikes and you're out. I've walked through the woods. I have tried to conquer my fear of heights, and I'm walking in the dark. No. This is no. So finally he's like, okay, fine. Like, we'll go back to the car and I'll drive you home. As we're walking, I don't know what it was. The hair on the back of my neck suddenly stood up. I start to feel like someone is watching me. And all my girlies with anxiety like me, you know what I'm talking about. But this was different. This was different. This was like burning 2 holes in the back of my head because they're staring so hard. And it was so bad that I kept turning around and there was literally no one there. My eyes are fully adjusted at this point. There is no one there that I can see. And I start walking so close to this dude that I'm flat tiring his shoes, which means I'm like stepping on the back of his shoes every couple of steps, and he's getting super mad at me. But eventually I just grab his arm and I say, there is something out here with us. And I made sure to whisper it because at the end of the day, if there is a living human being out there, I don't want them knowing that I feel like something is wrong. And number 2, it was really quiet out there, like deafeningly silent. And he immediately tells me like, Elena, it's okay. Like, your anxiety, it's okay. I understand that you're scared of the dark, but everything's gonna be fine. Like, there's no one else out here. There's no other cars. Everything's gonna be fine. We take probably 3 steps and start to hear rustling. And immediately, this is when my breath literally is taken away. Like, I'm like, I can't breathe. And again, he's like rubbing my back and he's like, it's okay. Like, there is seriously no one else out here. You're gonna be fine. We're walking for maybe a minute. We have our flashlights out. From our right, a rock doesn't tumble out. It is thrown out into the middle of the path that we're walking. I mean, like, right in front of us. Like, someone threw it. This was a game time decision, right? Right. I left him in the woods. I ran so fast, I left him in the woods. I have never ran faster in my entire life. In all my running girlies, I ran for a minute. Sprinted for a minute. I get to his car and I'm trying the door handles and I immediately am going through all these scenarios. I'm like, what am I going to do if if there is a person in the woods? So I'm trying the door handles. I'm going to like literally every door and all of them are locked. And all of a sudden I hear him giggling and like jogging out of the forest. And he was like, that rabbit really scared me. A rabbit? And I probably look disgusting at this point, but I I legitimately lost my mind on him. I was like, since when do rabbits pick up rocks and throw them at people? Since when has that ever happened? But anyways, we get in the car, we drive off. The whole time I'm asking him, what do you think that was? What do you think that was? Do you think that was a real person? Do you think that was a ghost? What was that? And I don't think he took me very seriously at the time because he was like, whatever. Needless to say, I never talked to him ever again. And now I will elaborate on why it's so scary to me. I don't think that was paranormal by any means. Because when you experience something paranormal, it's almost like an instantaneous thought, right? You're trying to rationalize. You're trying to go through the scenarios in your head on how it is possible that that happened. This was different. I have never felt so fearful in my entire life. And let me ask you this. When you get home late at night, maybe after a night out, or when you get home from work, school, etc., what do you think you're going to see when you turn the light on in your room? Probably some decor, probably your bed, your desk, maybe a pet lives there, I don't know. But you anticipate on what you're going to see because you're prepared for what you're going to see. I'm not comparing bedrooms in the woods, but I was not anticipating someone else to be out there because there's no cars out there. There was no way for someone to get out there if they didn't get there before the sun went down, if you catch my drift. And I think there's something, at the end of the day, there is something so deeply frightening about knowing someone was watching you the whole time. And there is something equally as frightening knowing you never saw them. And then you have to think about a plethora of things. Like, why was that person following two teenagers in the woods without making their presence known? How did that person get out into the middle of the woods in the middle of the night? I left a key part of the effing story out. When we got there and we got our little pass, the state trooper or whoever was working there told us that we were the last people going in. So be that as you may, moral of the story, you never know.
Follow me here, okay? Girl next door turned into the nation's sweetheart, an idol, pretty much a celebrity, who was also a TV news reporter who reported on true crime. But not in a million years would anyone have thought that her death would be the one reported on next. Today's story starts off in southwest England, where Jill Wendy Dando was born. She was the baby of the family. She had an older brother. And from her early years in life, Jill showed how strong of a girl she was. At 3 years old, she had to undergo an extensive heart surgery to fix a hole in her heart. And luckily they did fix it, but it ended up being a life-saving surgery for baby Jill. Jill, as a young girl, was very bright. She was intellectual, she was quick-witted, and she was also kind, friendly, a very approachable, likable person. And that stayed her personality throughout her entire life. She was just the kind of person that was so easy to like. Jill Dando got her first job working as a reporter for the local weekly newspaper where both her father and her brother worked. This would be her first job as a reporter, but it would show throughout the progression of her career that Jill just had it. She just had the thing it takes to be successful in that career field. She had a confident delivery, she had charisma, but while at the same time being a very relatable person, she had all the things she needed to have in order to engage an audience, and she did it well. When Jill first got that job, she walked into an office filled with men and boys, and she said, "What you can do, I can do better." Not in an arrogant way though, she just backed herself and she knew her potential. 5 years later, she moved away from her hometown at 23 years old and started working at BBC. It's at BBC where she would eventually make the transition from radio to TV. And this was huge because remember, this was in the 90s, so it wasn't yet normal or typical for everyone and their mother to have a TV in their house. TV and TV channels were still up and coming, so it was a very exciting point of her life. By May of 1998, Jill was in her late 20s when she got the massive opportunity to move from regional to national television in London to report television news still with BBC. And in the years following that, she was on programs such as The Breakfast News, The Morning News, 6 o'clock News, a travel program called Holiday, which was incredibly popular, and the very well-known crime series Crime Watch. Jill Dando was reporting on Crime Watch from 1995 all the way up to the day her life was brutally ripped away from her, and we'll loop back around to this. But long story short, Jill Dando was a big deal. Everyone knew her name, everyone knew her face. Granted that the odds of her face being on your TV at different times throughout the
the day were pretty high, and her image only scaled higher when she had a bit of a rebrand. Not that she needed it, but she got the Princess Diana haircut as she started styling in similar ways as Princess Diana, and the two of them had so much in common. They honestly look really similar, and they were very often compared to each other. Princess Diana was the people's princess, and Jill Dando was the nation's sweetheart. She loved her job, she was amazing at it, and she quickly became the face of UK television, pretty much. During her time at BBC, Jill Dando got into a romantic relationship with BBC executive Bob Wheaton. Their relationship was kept hush mode for a little bit. They kept it a secret because, well, he was way higher up in BBC, and there was definitely probably some power imbalance there. But they ended up dating for around 7 years. They went their separate ways in 1996, and it was, from what we know, an amicable breakup. In December of 1997, when Jill was 35 years old, her career still very much blossoming and blooming, she met a doctor, a man called Alan Farthing, and let's call it what it was, love at first sight. They fell in love, they got engaged, they started planning their dream wedding, but tragically, Jill Dando would not get to see the day of her wedding, and all of her hopes and dreams would be cut way too soon. April 26th of 1999, it was a Monday. Jill Dando at this time still had her house, but she had pretty much been living at her fiance's house with him. She didn't spend much time at her own house, but that day she had to stop by at her house to pick up something that was faxed to her. She parked her car, stepped out, and started making her way to her front door. But before she could even make it a step inside her house, she was approached by someone who took a weapon, pressed it to the back of her head, and fired. Minutes later, her neighbor who was out on a walk saw Jill lying in a pool of her own blood. She immediately called 911 and broke the news on that call to the operator that the victim looked to be Jill Dando. Emergency services arrived as fast as they could. They rushed Jill to the hospital, but despite their best efforts, 37-year-old Jill was pronounced deceased by 1:07 p.m. Her cause of death ruled as a single wound to the head. They determined the weapon had to be pressed right up to her head because of how severe the injury was. Later that day, the news broke, and it was her co-workers, her friends, the people that she had spent years working side by side. It was them who had to report the news of her death. And it was a shock to the nation, a devastating shock that I'm sure you could feel in the air. The aftermath of this happening was chaotic, as I'm sure you can imagine. Police were all up and down that street attempting to begin their investigation. Media coverage was insanity, and it baffles me. I know it's their job to literally take pictures and cover the media, but the disrespect to try and step over people at a crime scene just to try and get the best picture, it's a little bit disgusting. Regardless, this was breaking news. Speculation about a motive quickly began spreading by the public, and law enforcement had to start trying to find the person who did this. Granted, this was done in broad daylight on her own doorstep in the middle of the day in public, yet they were close to 0 witnesses. Maybe one witness. Her next door neighbor said that on or around the time they believed that Jill was attacked, he heard a scream, but he was unsure of what it was or who it came from. Nevertheless, witness statements were not going to be much help in this investigation, but what could be of help turned out to be CCTV footage. Authorities decided the first thing to do was retrace Jill's steps the morning of, to try and figure out how her day started, where she was, who she spoke to see if there was any sign of anything going wrong. After looking at over 400 hours of CCTV footage, they put together that morning Jill left her fiance's house, drove to a gas station, got gas, stopped at a couple stores to buy things she needed, and then she made her way to her house, which is where she parked the car, got out, and was murdered. The next question investigators had was, who knew Jill's day-to-day schedule? More specifically, who was aware that Jill would be stopping at her house that day? Somebody had to know because they were there before Jill even got the chance to open her doors. So who would have known? Well, the answer to that question is her agent, a man called John. John was the one and only person who knew that Jill was going to be stopping at her house to pick up something from her fax machine because he was the one who faxed it to her and told her to go pick it up. So John was questioned, but then he was ruled out. So then police had to do what was kind of process of elimination. They looked into Jill's close friends and family and spoke to them to see if any of them stood out. And that is including her ex-boyfriend, Mr. Bob Wheaton, because come to find out, he owed her a lot of money, so maybe that could have been a motive. But eventually he was ruled out as a suspect, and nobody else questioned stood out either, so no luck there. Next was the idea that a professional hired could have done this, and with this theory there seems to be 2 different opinions. On one side of things, some people believe that there is no way that this could have been a professional because it was in broad daylight. It was done by somewhere where it could have been seen and they could have been caught. It was too risky. It was a sloppy job. On the other hand though, that's why some people believe that it could have been a professional because it was done in broad daylight and nobody saw it, because maybe the person that did it was so experienced, knew exactly what they were doing and how they were doing it, that they were able to execute it perfectly without anyone seeing them. And a potential theory theory that arose to support the idea that this was done by a hired professional had to do with what was going on in the world at that time. Now, quick disclaimer, I am very uneducated when it comes to speaking on history, wars, politics, anything of the sort. I should not be the person who you look at if you're trying to learn and inform yourself about that sort of stuff, because I'm trying to educate myself, but that is just not in my wheelhouse. However, I will try to explain this in a way that makes sense. Stay with me. In the year that Jill Dando was murdered, NATO, which included the UK where Jill was from, was involved in the Kosovo War. They were fighting against Serbia. 3 weeks before Jill's life was taken, she was on TV appealing for aid for the Kosovar, I don't know how to pronounce that, Kosovar Albanian refugees. So she was fighting to spread awareness for refugees and victims of the war. And again, she was from the UK, which was part of NATO, which was in war against Serbian forces. Following her death, a number of threatening calls were made to the BBC claiming that they were messages from Serbia and claiming that they would end the life of British journalists who were women to make a statement and send a message. People believed that their motive for these actions or these threats was revenge from Serbian extremists who could have been angry at British media coverage, cough cough, Jill Dando, and or NATO's attack on Serbia, which had just started a few weeks before her death. In simpler terms, people started to speculate and wonder, could her death be an act of violence from Serbia wanting to make a statement or send a message to the UK? Does that make sense? Anyway, in the end, the lead investigator on the case ruled out the possibility of a Serbian connection, so that was also scratched. Is it starting to sound like every lead is a dead end and they are having zero luck with making any progress at all in this case? Yeah, I bet it is. That's what it felt like to the British public as well. A year went by with no movement on the case, and let's not forget who we're talking about, Jill Dando, the nation's sweetheart. For there to be no suspects named, no persons of interest named, no arrest made, was crazy after a whole year. And it was pretty frustrating and I bet pretty scary to the public. The person who did this was just out and about and no one knew who it was. Police finally are like, let's start from the beginning. Let's look through the people and names from a year ago and see if we missed something. In comes a man named Barry George into the picture. Barry George was a name police had heard before a year ago, back when the crime took place. He was a local man and he was suspicious for a few different reasons. Let's talk about some of them. Day after Jill's death, authorities got 3 separate calls reporting that Barry was in the area at that time, reportedly acting very weird, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but think about it. 3 different people thought that he was acting weird enough that they felt the need to call the police and report it, so he must have been acting pretty off. He called a taxi company to ask them to tell him what time they saw him there and what he was wearing, as if he was trying to make sure that he had an alibi. He was kind of making sure that he had his story straight. For what? We don't know. He had a criminal record for SA and he had a weird, concerning obsession with Princess Diana, who looked exactly like Jill Dando. So police decided that, yeah, it might be worthwhile to dig deeper on this guy a year later. They got a search warrant for his house. In his house, they find a coat. In the coat pocket, they find a single particle of residue. That particle of residue matched the residue that was found at the scene of the crime. Because of that, on May 25th of 2000, Barry George was arrested and charged with the murder of Jill Dando. The following year, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But get this, his conviction was overturned, claiming that the evidence they had against him was circumstantial and deemed as unreliable. So it was overturned by the Court of Appeal in 2007, and following a retrial, George was acquitted and released in 2008 after spending 8 years in prison. He didn't do it. As of today, Jill Dando's murder remains unsolved. There are theories, conspiracies, but no definitive answer has been found. People have speculated that maybe it was an ex-boyfriend of Jill's, a secret boyfriend. There's still a big belief that Jill made the wrong person mad, the wrong criminal mad, while reporting on Crime Watch, and maybe got a little too close to finding something out, or just rubbed the wrong person the wrong way, and her life was ended as a result to get revenge. There's also the possibility that it was a sick, crazy fan that has been spoken about. There's a chance that this is a case of mistaken identity, or there is also the possibility that she was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. Regardless, all of the above is just speculation because we don't know. If I'm being completely honest, it does keep me up at night that we don't know, because it just makes me feel so like icky knowing that people have ended the lives of other people and have never been caught, and they're just like out and about going grocery shopping and like going to the movie theater, probably, or probably not actually. They're probably doing weird things. Anyway, that is all I have for today's video. Let me know your thoughts on this case, and thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to Jill's case. I love you all very, very much. I hope you're having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day, make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the foreheads, every single one of you.